Welcome to Because the Beatles, the podcast about the Beatles, everything about the Beatles 24/8. I'm Allison.
And I'm Erica. And before we start, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, or stream us on Spotify and on YouTube. And if you're enjoying BC the Beatles, feel free to leave us a preferably 5-star review so other Beatlemaniacs can find us.
Also, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter/X, and TikTok. We'll be posting videos, photos, and more from this episode and beyond. And you can always email us at bcthebeatles@gmail.com.
We're still on our summer break, so we're bringing you something a little different. A short preview of our recent appearance on one of our favorite podcasts, Ranking the Beatles. Here's how Ranking the Beatles describes their show. Musician and self-described Beatles fanatic Jonathan Pretus ranked the entire recorded catalog of the Beatles because he's a big nerd. Then he decided to make a podcast to talk with other people and learn about their connection with the Beatles' music. In each episode, Jonathan and his co-host/wife, Julia, a more level-headed casual fan, invite guests on to discuss the rankings, what they think makes each song so great or not so great, and see if it really is a fool's errand to try and rank the music of the greatest band of all time. Jonathan and Julia's guests include many of the folks you've heard on BC the Beatles, like Ken Womack, Andrew Sandoval, Christine Feldman-Barrett, and Caitlin Larkin. But they also chat with musicians, engineers, actors, and writers from well beyond the Beatles universe. My favorite Ranking the Beatles episode features Michael Cerveris, one of my all-time favorite theater actors, very appropriately discussing the song Till There Was You, which, of course, started out as a musical theater song. So today we have a short excerpt from our appearance on Ranking the Beatles, where we kept the Let It Be vibes going and discussed the song One After 909, ranked at number 85 on Jonathan and Julia's list. And if you like what you hear, you can find a link to the entire episode in the show notes. Enjoy!
Why do I have One After 909 at number 85? Now, as a songwriter, I think there's a really interesting duality in the late period Beatles recording a song written pre-Beatles. I know personally the last thing I would ever want to do is go back and record a song now that I wrote at 17 that I'd constantly pushed aside. You can even hear John's hesitancy in Get Back when he says he wants to go back and rework the lyrics. But there's just a certain something that overrides any perceived lack of quality when it's filtered through the John and Paul Everly Brothers harmony that they do on this track. The lyrics are not at all deep and meaningful, and yet it doesn't matter. It's all about the performance here. Now, they're about 20 minutes into the rooftop show when this performance is captured. So they've gotten over any nerves they may have had, and by this point, they're really just on fire. It's really a perfect performance. George's leads in the verse are economical and tasteful, and he plays an absolutely killer guitar solo. It's such a great comparison to what he was doing on the song 7 or so years prior, when his playing was abrasive and almost clumsy. Here, he's confident and he's so on top of his game. He's playing exactly what the song needs, which is really a talent not a lot of guitar players tend to have. John and Paul are just so in sync vocally. Both of their voices are just killer here, and I especially love the rasp that John's voice has in the bridge section. It just sounds so good. Billy Preston, like on most of these songs, is the MVP. His electric piano parts really make the song move and give it so much life. You know, the track itself rocks on its own, but it rolls because of what Billy brings to the table. His little fills throughout just give such great character throughout the song. I think overall, what I really love most about this track is that it's them at their most human, and they're not necessarily aiming for the perfect take. They're just playing music and feeding off of each other with all the wisdom and history and time and shared experiences they've had. And for a couple of minutes, you get to kind of see the 16-year-old kid versions of them playing music that made them feel alive back then. And I think that's kind of a priceless moment in their catalog. I'm so glad that the official version of the song is the live one from the rooftop and not an in-studio version, because I think it gives a vibe and electricity that few other Beatles songs have. So, in short, I love this song. Erica, Allison, I throw it to you. Whoever would like to go first.
Oh my goodness, I don't know how to follow that, Jonathan. That was beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that this track was just one that was sitting there waiting for the right time. And it just goes to show, like you said, you know, it's like, it doesn't matter if they're revisiting a track that was written, when John was just a young lad in Liverpool, and again trying to write a Rock Island Line. I think it was waiting for them to sort of grow up a little bit and feel that sort of need for the nostalgia, which you actively see them sort of revisiting and Get Back and Let It Be, where they start playing, all the old, like Little Richard and Chuck Berry, going back to the music of their youth.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it makes sense then that they would bring in One After 909 and finally give it its ultimate version, and as I was like listening to the other versions, I think the official version is definitely the highlight, the standout for me, because I sort of feel like the others they get a bit dirgy.
Yeah.
And I feel like, so I think again, the MVP, you're right, is Billy Preston. I think that's really what kind of like sets it apart and makes it kind of makes it that good, really. But I have a question for all of you all. Did you guys hear that the lyrics sort of changed from the 1960 version? Because I swear to God, I heard him say, "You're only fucking around with me."
I did hear that.
Okay.
Because I found myself going, is he
like,
saying that? Is he saying fucking?
I listened to
Sounds like it.
Yeah. I listened to it like a million times because I'm like, it does not sound like foolin' at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's pretty badass for that early for that early on record.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, so that just makes me even like it even more, even earlier. But yeah, I agree with you too, Jonathan. I think it's really sweet to see that sort of like them become those kids again when they play it, especially on the roof, to watch that visually.
Yeah.
As for me, I thought I love this song. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to call this song like a groundbreaking Beatles song, but for me, it's definitely in my top 50 probably songs. I think that it's so interesting to see one song going through the different stages of the Beatles' career. And I always hope one day that they unearth, like one time they tried it during the Sgt. Pepper years or something, so we can see the whole like full circle of it. But I think when they did it again, like Allison said, it was like the right moment. Everything was perfect. Like in 1960, the tempo was too manic. In 62, 63, it was too slow and boring. 69, it was perfect. It was perfect. You see, like George's guitar playing came such a long way, and whatever he was doing in 63, 62, no, it does not help the song. What he did, he and Billy, I think, are side by side as the most fantastic elements of this. And then you hear the joy in John and Paul's voices, which you don't hear a lot of joy in John and Paul's voices during this time in their career. And it's so fun that for 2 minutes and 11 seconds or whatever, they forget about all of the other shit that's bogging them down, and they're just having fun, and they are 16 again. And it's great. And I think the other reason why this is interesting is that it's really the first time in the Beatles' like real-time career where we see the introduction of nostalgia as like a defining element of the Beatles' story. So before Let It Be, the Beatles never looked back. Like, they created trend after trend. And by the time the general public was onto the trend, the Beatles were on to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
They're way ahead. They don't care. And it's only at this point when, they're approaching 30, they're, partnering off, they're having kids, they're dealing with the business aspect of, the band. Alan Klein, Brian passed away. There's so many heavy things with them. And it's only now, as they're looking for something to fill the time, a way to procrastinate, whatever it is, that they're coming back to these older songs, and they're coming back to nostalgia. And even when they recorded songs like I'll Follow the Sun or When I'm 64 or whatever back, they did it without comment. So they did pluck songs from their earlier catalogs, but in this one, we have a narrative around it, thanks to Let It Be.
Mm-hmm.
And we watch them looking so different and sounding different and looking, having the weight of the world on their shoulders sometimes, discussing themselves, and they may not have known exactly what was coming next, but they knew they were at the end of some kind of era,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And from that point on, nostalgia is such a huge part of the Beatles story. Obviously, they broke up, and once you're part of history, nostalgia's there. But I think what's most unique about the Beatles is that, like all these other trends, they started this trend. They started it by talking about themselves. And what other rock band, they started almost the genre of rock history in this way. And from that point on, and through, many years from now, when we was fab, early days, now and then, like, nostalgia is such a defining part of how we as second, third, fourth generation Beatles fans experience the Beatles. So I think it's cool to see their kind of origin of this part of their narrative.
Yeah.
Damn, that was a whole statement,
yeah.
Erica. I'm impressed. Like,
Holy shit, snaps, dude.
Right?
yeah.
Well,
You should, like, I feel like that needs to be like a talk, like a fest presentation. Like, the Beatles invented music nostalgia. Like,
Well, and I
let
think
me
about
show you how.
I think they very much invent like the idea of like how do I want to phrase it? I think what they're doing here is they're inventing kind of the self mythologizing, like creating, like establishing your own legacy and kind of promoting it in real time in some way too. Cause also isn't this at the same time when like Neil Aspinall starts like putting material together for the documentary that they're calling The Long and Winding Road that would eventually
Yes, Neil
years
and
later.
Mal are working behind the scenes at Apple, trying to gather as much footage as they can to start this, Beatles biography that became the anthology in the end. I mean, a lot of that footage was used eventually.
And they'd already had like
right.
the Hunter Davies biography came out in 68, I guess. I think. So I feel like this is like kind of, and this is when they're talking about their career as a historical thing, like kind of looking back at things. Cause to kind of go back to what you were saying, like, I feel like the first time that they genuinely looked back and create something new was with Lady Madonna, which is definitely like a throwback to what they grew up with. But the first time I think that they create something of their own that's old and they go into their own kind of archives and they're open about it is One After 909. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think also it showcases their evolution musically because, obviously the very first recording is in that skiffle style. But, the thing that strikes me listening to all the different recordings in succession is just how different the final recording, it's very like almost like hard rock edge, to it. And so that just shows their evolution as well. But also, it also showcases, I think, that they were finally able to do it the way they really wanted to do it. I guess maybe at that point in their lives. But, for example, the version they did at the, For Me to You sessions, or it sounds very much in that pocket.
Yeah.
No wonder they hated it because it wasn't good.
Yeah.
So it was too much in that like sort of style that doesn't bode well for that song. I think the way the song was meant to be presented is how they did it on the roof. I think that would be, that's sort of its ultimate form.
Yeah, it's kind of like they started imitating Rock Island Line, and then they became the Beatles, and they're like, well, we can't do something that's this derivative, so we're going to make it into the Beatles.
Yeah.
And it didn't quite work because that song didn't work with that style that they were enmeshed in at that time. And then when they revisited it for Let It Be, they've been doing this long enough that they just have this instinctive knowledge of how to put it together right in a way where it still sounds like it's got that influence that they originally meant to, but at the same time, it sounds contemporary. It doesn't sound out of place on Let It Be. And I tried going back and listening to that version, and then right after listening to From Me to You and Please Please Me and some of these ones that they did contemporaneously, does not sound like in the same genre at all. It does not fit with that early stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So Julia, what do you think, my love? 1 after 909. What are your thoughts?
I just want to say it's fine as it is for what it is. This is an absolutely cutting remark from George.
I don't know that that's the quote, but that's not the quote, but that's kind of the gist he seems to be giving, where he's like,
Still,
you don't need to do that.
Still.
That's fine.
Savage.
Yeah.
Just like, woof.
Yeah.
I'd be like, damn, that was just witnessed a murder. Like, just, yeah, that was a lot. This song feels like it's 10 minutes long somehow. Like it feels like 10 minutes long, but also like 30 seconds long in the same vein. I think they do the chorus like 16 times, but it's like so fast. It's like a super fun and spirited freight train coming through. Like I'm listening to it and I'm like, oh, there's the chorus again. There's the chorus again. There's the chorus again. Like, how many times do they do it? And I was like, this song, like, this has to be like an extra long Beatles song. And I looked it up and it's like just 3 minutes. Yeah. Maybe. Is it even 3 minutes? Yeah. And I'm like, how are they getting like, I don't know, 37 repetitions of the chorus in this 3-minute song? Because they're going at like this frantic breakneck speed. Yeah. Just like pushed along by Billy Preston's electric piano. Just like, let's fucking do this, boys.
Well, if you look at the differences, like the first one that we listened to was like 2 minutes and 15 seconds, and the other one was over 3. Yeah. So like in 1963, so they really, they pushed it.
Yeah. For sure.
But I agree, Julia. I agree. When I was like listening to all the versions earlier, I was like, is it over yet? Like not particularly the Let It Be version, but the earlier ones. I was like, how many times are you going to pick up those bags, like, and run right home? I can't anymore.
It's not a good song back then.
Have this song, please. Have it, or like quarter it.
Yeah. But then on the Let It Be version, you're just like, pick them up again. Yeah.
It's also interesting, like,
totally.
Compositionally, like the bridge, they always call the bridge like the middle 8 because it's usually 8 measures. This is 16, so it's a double middle 8, and they repeat it, which is like a very rare move in terms of like song structure. Like it's unusual to repeat a bridge like that. So it does feel like it goes a little bit long. Then you get like the chorus repeats at the end with like, set you traveling on the 1 after 9-0. Set you traveling on the 1 after 9-0. And then you get the jazz hands ending, So, yeah.
Oh, thank you, Professor.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks again to Jonathan and Julia for inviting us on Ranking the Beatles. You can listen to the rest of it and subscribe to their show wherever you find your podcasts or through the link in the show notes.
So until next time, guys, thanks for listening to Because the Beatles. And as always, subscribe on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening right now, and give us a rating/review so other Beatlemaniacs can find us.
And follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter/X, YouTube, and TikTok. We'll be posting photos and more from this episode and beyond. And remember, you can always email us at bcthebeatles@gmail.com. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.